Stan, we're live.
Thanks, Larry, the Liberty Guy. We have breaking news. A lawsuit has been filed by Rhode Island parents against Rhode Island Governor Daniel McKee. You know, across America, parents are uniting, are standing together against oppressive policies, mandates going on in the public school and private school system. And today in Rhode Island, one day after Governor McKee pledged to extend what many feel and what this lawsuit claims is an unconstitutional school mask mandate, one day after he made that pledge to extend that mandate, a group of Rhode Island parents filed a lawsuit today in Rhode Island Superior Court. To this we've come. The question we're going to ask throughout is, what are we doing to our children? Joining me now is Rich Southwell, the lead plaintiff in the case, and Lori Gaddis Barrett, who is the mom responsible for organizing these plaintiff parents. Rich, Lori, welcome to In the Dugout.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for having us on.
Okay, I've got my cap on In the Dugout. Rich, what is your position on that?
I am a cap choice person, so I have opted not to wear a cap today.
Just like masks should be, right? Just
Absolutely.
like masks should be in schools, right? Optional, up to the parent. Lori, what's your choice today?
My choice is to support. I brought it to represent and show team spirit, but I'm not going to wear it either, but I'll have it available.
That's your choice. We can invite, we can recommend. Ultimately, in a free society, it's your choice, and that's what this lawsuit is all about, folks, right? That parents should have the choice to decide whether their children wear masks. Maybe even the local school district should decide. Rich, you're the lead plaintiff. Summarize why these parents are united in bringing this lawsuit.
Well, I think, we're in the third school year that's been impacted by the pandemic, and we've gone through a lot, and more importantly, we've watched our kids go through a lot. And, throughout the summer, we had a wonderful summer. It was normal. Kids were out playing. We were out going where we wanted to go. We weren't wearing masks. And we were assured, through most of the summer by the governor that, this would be a local school district decision. Local school committees would decide, what to do about masks. And I think in our district, we felt comfortable with that. This is something that should be, there's different places to make a decision, right? It's at the household level, at the school town level, it's at the state or the federal level. But that was the sort of thing that, and particularly based on the experience that many families had with masking last year, we felt it was something that we should make a decision on and weigh the pros and cons of wearing one versus not. Our school committee in Foster, Gloucester Regional had opted for a strongly recommend, but parents ultimately make the choice about whether to mask their children. We were very pleased with that. We went and re-enrolled our son after homeschooling him last year. And then, the governor stepped in and said, well, it's your choice as long as you make the right choice, and you did not, so I'm going to tell you.
Which is really no choice. Yeah, and I want to follow up on that with Lori. Lori, you've been on this show before. You're very involved in the Gloucester School District, which put out that, that optional mandate, if you would, last month. But it was the reversal, right? For like Rich said, for the whole summer, parents were expecting their kids were going to go back to school, either with a parent option or with their local school district making a decision. And then just days before the opening of school, the governor, the Department of Health reversed course, and they slapped on you, every parent in every school district, this mandate. So it's really this reversal, right? This flip-flop of policy that really angered parents. Is that correct?
That's essentially correct. So it was hard, right? Parents locally here in Gloucester had worked for a month with our school committee to share kind of what was going on in our households and what our thoughts were. And our school committee heard us, and to have the governor come out later and give the executive order was a real slap in the face, and it made a lot of activists here in Gloucester.
And that's the thing, right, about this, is that parents like you, Rich, I won't want to speak for you, but concur if you would. You guys probably weren't that political before, but now the government and the school system and the health Department of Health are imposing all these curriculum agendas and mandates and aggressive sex ed on your kid, you almost have no choice anymore but to stand up and be heard. And in this case, you're doing it legally. Rich, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think that's probably the most interesting part of this movement so far, is that the people that are involved are not your, garden variety activists, right? They're not the people that are always taking to the streets.
Right.
These are people that go to work, pay their taxes, raise their kids, coach sports, and I think adults are willing to put up with a lot, right? So we went through, mask mandates and lockdowns and, closures of businesses and all of those things. But once it starts hitting the kids, we become a lot more active. There is no tolerance for that. And people start coming off of the sidelines to get involved. And I think one of the things, our group started as a Facebook group, but what's happening is not a lot of Facebook chatter and parents blowing off steam, in social media. People are making babysitting arrangements and going to meetings. They're opening their checkbooks. They're sitting down to write their story about what their child is going through and how it's impacting the child, how it's impacting the family, and their concerns and anxieties about the future for their child. And that is not politics, that is parenting.
That's right. Politics aside, medical data aside, there is nothing stronger than a parent's love for their children and concern for their health and their future. Lori, you described to me offline, please tell our audience the energy, the passion, the emotion. Tell us how you organize. You've had meetings. Tell us about just the energy you're seeing from all these parents.
So the energy started right here in Gloucester, and the day after the governor announced his executive order, I got a phone call from a mom. We've got to do something about this. What are we going to do? And so we started a Facebook group, and we tried to find other parents that wanted to do. None of us knew what to do. Rich had it exactly right. We're just normal people that are concerned for our kids. So we, in 3 days, corralled about 25 people to come to our first meeting, and we discussed a lot of different options. And what we were trying to figure out is, what's the best strategy? Is it, this or that or the other thing? And ultimately, one of the parents who attended the meeting had been in touch with this attorney, Gregory Picciarelli, and we spoke to him at that first meeting. And then we met the next week, and we decided, yes, we're going to follow this lawsuit litigation idea. And then it just started taking off. And I was getting messages from other people in other school districts and in other cities, parts of the state. And they were saying, how can we join? How can we join? And to be honest, we weren't actually sure when we first started getting asked. And finally, we just said, you know what? If there are people in the state of Rhode Island that need to be heard, we're going to help them.
And indeed, your lawsuit includes parents, not just from the Gloucester School District. I saw Warwick, I saw Smithfield, I saw North Smithfield. And I know there are many more that want to join in. I mean, there's nothing like the love and passion of a parent for the children. Rich, and one of the brilliant things about the way this lawsuit was put together, I think, is, yes, there's a constitutional grounds for it, in that the governor probably defied the General Assembly's law. Yes, there's probably a medical, and I want to talk about that later, medical case to be made why the grounds for medically that the state is putting forth don't hold any water. But what you started your lawsuit with was the stories of the 14 parent plaintiffs. Heartbreaking stories. Rich, you write, my wife and I feel very strongly that wearing a mask for prolonged periods is unhealthy for our son. He was thrilled originally to be going back to the school, and then you withdrew him because you were also disappointed. You concluded your story. How many more school years are we going to ruin for him and his classmates? Please tell us about that.
Well, I think you said it. We felt good enough right up until the very end of the summer about sending him back, and it was going to be, something much more normal than was offered last year. We felt like the education, with the academics would increase. We thought quality of life in the building, which is a big consideration for us, would improve dramatically. And we felt great about sending him back. And he was thrilled. 5 days until school starts. I'm going to a new building. I'm going to be back with my friends. All of those things that
kids need their friends, don't they? Yeah. They need their friends.
And they need to see their faces. And, all the things, like middle school is, this would have been the start of middle school for him. He was out at home last year for sixth grade, but, middle school is the good, the bad, and the awkward, right? And he needs to have that experience. And that's being, it's not on offer right now. And I think, as a parent, that's his story, right? The bitter disappointment of not being able to see his friends every day for just lunch or walking in the halls or whatever interactions you have, when you're not learning. Those things don't happen necessarily during the homeschool environment.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking, and it's just unnecessary.
It is. It's heartbreaking. To this we've come, and again, I'll ask, what are we doing to our children? Lori, let me read to you a few excerpts I highlighted from the 14 wonderful stories, heartbreaking stories. One parent writes, the loneliness and isolation of distance learning took an emotional toll on my daughter. Over the course of the year, I could see her interest in school waning. She's asking why it's okay to visit with her friends and have ice cream or go to a restaurant but can't without a mask, but can't do it in school. One, please help my little girl. And if you go right now, I'll show you a website as I'm bringing this, Lori, up, where you can go, you can read the whole, you can download the complaint here from this website I'm going to show you as Lori's talking. You can also fill out a form to be updated from us, but it's rightfreedom.org/Parents United. But Lori, talk about this emotional toll that parents and children are experiencing.
It's terrible, and that story is terrible. And I've heard, I've talked with hundreds of parents over the course of the last 2 weeks, and everybody has a story that's just as heart-wrenching, and some of them are even more heart-wrenching. There were kids that have asthma and have breathing problems to begin with, and they still can't breathe. And then I think there was another one where there was a skin condition developing because of allergies and the mask being wet. And it's heartbreaking.
And so I'm a parent. One parent writes, Rich, and I think this pretty much sums it up. And even though we were joking about it earlier with the caps, this is the cap choice show, and just like schools should be a mask optional schools. One parent writes, it hurts me deeply to watch my child have these issues and not be able to help her. The government mandate is strict, it is unyielding, it is unbending, it is uncaring of the stories that you and your fellow plaintiffs write about in this lawsuit. It's why a one-size-fits-all policy cannot ever be successful. How frustrated is it for you, Rich, that the only option you had was in the courts?
It's incredibly frustrating, particularly after having worked with the local school committee in my community to, secure a policy that I thought was appropriate for my child, and then just have it, run roughshod because, the governor decided that was not the right thing to do. It's incredibly frustrating. And it's not the one, you went through a long list. The one thing that I would also mention is that in many cases, these policies are being ruthlessly enforced within the
Ruthlessly. One says, I feel like my kid's going to a prison and my child is now afraid of teachers.
Yeah. And
what are we doing to our children?
And that's a problem.
A bigger problem, if either one of you comment, let me show this. This is an excerpt from the lawsuit. And it's not just about this school year and this mask mandate. Again, this lawsuit is brilliantly written, this complaint.
Agreed.
You're saying if we don't take a stand here, whether there's new variants of this in the future, whether there's other health concerns that come up, this ruthless government is going to impose mandate after mandate after. So you are not just looking at it for this short-term mask mandate, but for the future of parents and where the line is for government versus government control and parental rights. Is that correct? Either one.
Yeah, I think things have become very much out of balance, and this is really about trying to reestablish some balance. Historically, it's been teachers, school committee and parents kind of working together, to come up with outcomes. And not every policy is popular with every family, but you feel like you've got a seat at the table. There is a process. The process is followed. The outcome is what it is. And generally speaking, people comply, because we're all good citizens and community members. That has gone out the window, and the amount of decision making happening locally or in the household level is just being sucked upward, further up into the government, right? So now we're at the state level. And that we just have to reestablish the balance. This cannot persist.
Lori, as it states here in the section we're looking at, these kinds of mandates might never end if parents don't stand up and take a stand.
And that's the parents that I speak with. That's exactly what the concern is. It's like when, I think I can't remember who said it, so forgive me. But somebody said, "What do we do when we get to the end of the Greek alphabet?" And that we could be looking at this for 9 more years, and we think
we know that COVID. It's like the flu. It's not going to go away. It's going to be managed. It's going to be contained, and we're going to have to learn to live with it. But are we going to have to live with unconstitutional executive tyranny over our lives and over our schools forever and ever? That's the point, right?
And you're echoing exactly what all these parents are telling us. And there were many of them, right? We saw that in the letter that the representatives sent to Governor McKee. Our representatives are hearing from our people, and still nothing is happening.
They sit on the sideline. The General Assembly has from day one had the power, your representatives, the people you voted for, to be in that House, Senate, and that General Assembly Senate, that General Assembly House. And yet for the better part of 18 months, they sat on their hands, and the only time they tried to put a clamp on the governor's executive emergency when it came to the right to spend the $1 billion coming from the federal government. They stopped it, and that's the basis that's the legal, we're not going to get too legal here, but that's the basis for this lawsuit, is that the General Assembly law that the governor himself signed said your emergency powers are over with regard to this pandemic. And then 5 or 6 weeks later, he redeclares another state of emergency. Like you said, Lori, with the Delta variant. What about the Theta variant? What about the next variant, right? All the way on down the line. All right, I want to change it. Tell me how you feel about this. I know you guys have considered it because it's in the lawsuit. Again, here's another excerpt. You guys recognize that you're going to be called out. Maybe by the media, maybe by crazies on the left, or crazies on the right, whoever. But you're aware that you might be made a target of. How is it you said that doesn't matter, we're moving forward anyway? Let's start with you, Rich.
I've been watching this unfold for the duration of the pandemic, and it's clear that it's not going to go away. It's just temporary argument is long gone. That's out the window, right? It's not going to end until people start to say no. And watching my son's face when I told him he wasn't going back to school, as we had said he was, that was my trigger point. I was like, okay, this is not going to end. I think I've known that for a while, but now this is the moment where, I've had my fill and I need to jump in and get involved. And I think, like I said, it's about restoring some balance and making a stand. And my wife and I talked about this, for days. Do we join the lawsuit? Do we put our names on it? Somehow we finally eventually ended up at the top of it. There are going to be consequences. Some of those consequences are going to be good. Some of those consequences are going to be not so good. And some of those consequences are going to be completely unexpected. And, our view is that it's kind of what keeps life interesting, and we'll get through it. We've been through plenty, over 20 years of marriage. So this is what's important for our son. We want to leave him in the best possible position, and walking away from this just isn't an option at this point for him.
Now, Lori, you're not a plaintiff in this, but you are the parent who proactively initiated organizing this parent group, in which directly led talking with the attorney, Greg Petrelli, who happens to be the same attorney on the Gloucester school committee that filed those 3 motions, in August.
Right.
Rich talked about consequences to you guys. I want to go back to consequences for the kids and tie that into a larger question here. So let me start with this. Here's what another parent wrote. Clear signs of depression were setting in, like no longer wanting to do things she once enjoyed, lethargy, etc. Our child who once enjoyed her teachers now fears them. I fear that once this is over, she, like many other children, will require therapy. You can imagine feeling that as a parent, but here's where I want to tie it in. This is why this lawsuit is so important, and this is why General Assembly action should be so important. Right now, these executive orders, and again, this lawsuit argues brilliantly, it doesn't just make a legal case, it actually makes the medical case. Why the justification that the governor and the Department of Health have been putting forth does not hold water. It brilliantly tears apart the medical case. So this case, if it's heard, is going to focus on medical science as much as it is on constitutional law. And that's a debate that's been missing because the executive actions have had no medical debate. We're not hearing both sides of the arguments. Our Dr. Boston on our show for over a year has providing the other side of the medical debate. But nobody up at that State House, nobody in that General Assembly is hearing that debate. It looks like now finally in this court, we will challenge the medical basis, which is a bogus basis for all these executive actions. So Lori, that was really a brilliant part to make sure we included medical debate in this lawsuit. Your thoughts?
So I want to tell you a little bit more about that. One
Good.
of the moms that I spoke with actually submitted ACA requests to the Rhode Island Department of Health and asked them for like their best piece of evidence that masking kids was a great idea. And I believe she told me that the Rhode Island Department of Health responded that there was not a responsive document. And then later she asked again, and she thought one of the studies that's actually cited in the lawsuit, if I understood it correctly. But yeah, I mean, there are parents all over. They've exhausted every means, and they're I guess exhausted is the right word. They're just exhausted. They're terrified to watch their children decline, and this is what needed to happen. This is like our last resort.
And this is my argument, why my criticism of General Assembly. Without General Assembly involvement, without going through the normal process of committee hearings, testimony from experts, from the public, debates on at the committee level, debates on the floor level before a Senate, the public is not, there's no transparency. The public is not hearing both sides. They're only hearing what the governor and the Department of Health want you to hear, which is not only incorrect, but very narrow and limited in its scope. We've been struggling for a year on our show to get the other side of the medical data out. Rich, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, and I think, yeah, you've hit on it. And, it's time to have a full airing of all of the data that's out there, and these emergency powers circumvent all of that, right? We just rule by fiat. And what I'm hearing and what I'm kind of observing in these meetings with parents and in talking to parents is the party line that's coming out from the Department of Health is not as effective as it once was, right? So if you look at the way they present, insert name of, health, restriction here, right? They always lead with, we know this works. This saves lives. Data, studies, we're gonna look at some more data, and then they finish with science.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, when nobody
without providing it.
Well, that was the thing. Like in the beginning, we didn't know any better, so it was like, okay, we'll go with that. 18 months into this, parents are watching what's happening to their kids, and they're saying, I'm going to need to see and hear a little bit more about this science you speak of. And then the latest wrinkle has been, well, the science is evolving, right? Because when something contradicts, well, the science is evolving. We know more now. The science that's not unsettled or evolving is the fact that my son's brain needs oxygen constantly. The kid has been breathing every day of every year of his entire life since birth. It's just that is settled science. All of this other stuff about we're saving lives and it works because we have data that we don't actually present to anyone. That's, to use a good COVID phrase, that argument has, and that presentation style has lost its efficacy.
Yep.
So we need to see more.
Yep, and these stories from these parents need to be told and heard by General Assembly and by judges as well. In the past, these lawsuits have focused solely on the constitutionality. And while they might have a point, it's not a compelling story. Because by arguing a constitutional argument, you're conceding that the medical argument the state makes is valid. You guys are not conceding that anymore. And that is such an important consideration. Then you add in it with these stories. Let me read some more. My granddaughter, age 11, struggles with anxiety, and COVID and masks have just exacerbated her issues. She experiences allergies regularly with nasal congestion and has increased trouble breathing when needing to wear a mask. On my show yesterday, we talked to Carissa, a mom in East Providence whose son has asthma. And on hot days, somebody tripped the fire alarm 3 times and he had to run up and down the stairs 3 times with an asthmatic condition wearing a mask. He can't breathe. These are stories that need to be told. And the General Assembly has shirked its duty. They should have been hearing these cases, these stories, this medical information, but because they did nothing, you had no resort to go to the courts. Lori Gaddis, I want to ask you this. Lori Gaddis Barrett. These mask mandates made no sense. All summer long, we heard from the Department of Health and the governor there would be no mask mandates. You and I know, or do we know, that this was really the teachers' unions at work saying we're not going to send our teachers back to school unless you implement a mask mandate, whether it makes medical sense or not. How much do you believe the teachers' union were behind all this unconstitutional stuff?
So all of it, 100%, right? And so we know that because of Judicial Watch doing the FOIA requests, and they uncovered emails between the leaders of the top teachers' unions, basically threatening the CDC that they wouldn't go back and open schools, and they threatened the CDC with an unflattering press release. And the emails are out there with the exchanges where the CDC then agreed that they were going to strongly, recommend masking, right? So we have teachers unions setting CDC policy,
influencing public health policy.
Yeah.
That is unthinkable, and we know if they can influence the CDC, they definitely influenced Health Director Nicole Alexander Scott and Governor McKee. All right, I want to end with you, Rich. Let me read one more excerpt. Again, let me get my breath because it's so, it's emotional. Listen to this. This is in the complaint from a parent from Smithfield. Their story. On the first day, both of my girls broke down in tears as soon as they got into the car. They were told their masks were not approved and that they needed to go to the principal to get new masks. Later in the day, my oldest was not able to breathe and pulled the mask down for a few minutes, only to get, harshly my words, spoken to in front of her peers, embarrassing her. We know that many of these teachers are becoming mask tyrants. They're embarrassing kids. What are we doing to our kids, Rich?
We're not doing them any favors, that's for sure. We're doing damage. Parents are now acutely aware that the damage, they see it every morning, they see it every afternoon at pickup. And again, like I said, they're going back and questioning the reasoning for the underlying policy to wear the masks, and they're not getting great answers. So when you see your child suffering and not doing, not living their best life, so to speak, and then you look at the logic or the rationale or the support for the policy, and they don't equalize or they don't match up, parents are going to start getting involved, and that's exactly what's happening now. So I am heartened by the fact that every time I go to one of these meetings, and we've had 3 of them, parking is harder and harder to get in the building. And I was blown away at the number of people that showed up last night. Like, again, I said this earlier, like these are people that, they didn't just jump on a Zoom call. They got in the car, after a day at work or taking care of the kids or whatever they were doing. But after a full day, they got in the car, they drove to this meeting, they listened intently, for an hour and a half, and then they got involved. So they actually took action. Like I said, it's not just a social media fluffy thing going off in the background. This is real.
Yeah.
And it's real because these stories are real and it's happening.
And as we showed earlier, if you're watching, you can get involved without being a plaintiff. Go to rifreedom.org/Parents United. You can download right here the whole lawsuit, see the whole complaint, 26 pages, and also fill out a form saying, yes, I want to support these parents. You can weigh in. You can make your voice heard. We're going to forward it to the parent groups for moral. And even, you might even, I assume, I know I talked to the attorney, they're still looking for more plaintiffs. You can either check a box and tell your story, and we'll forward this to you, Lori, for vetting.
Sure.
If you want to tell your story, and you maybe want to be considered as a plaintiff in this case, you can do so. rifreedom.org/Parents United. Rich, you make the great point with the parking lot being full. The parents, as we spoke in the show, parents across America are uniting to push back against this overreach in education, this clear infringement on parental rights and parental freedom when it comes to education, and this clear, authoritarian type government policy. It cannot be tolerated, and I thank you. I commend you both for your courage in standing up. We want to be the official chronicler of this lawsuit, so we'd like you or any other plaintiff who wishes to speak to be on regularly to update us. Greg Picciarelli, your attorney, has agreed to come on next week, but for this week, he wanted it, rightfully so, to be about you, the parents. Either of you have a final thought before we sign off?
I just want to say how grateful I am to Greg, to Lori, and you, each for your role in this. Greg has taken on the case. A lot of attorneys would not. Lori, your incredible organizational work in getting this thing built up and grown the right way. Like I said, the people that we're getting into this are phenomenal people that you just want to be associated with. And Mike, appreciate the platform to talk about what we're doing and hopefully get more people involved and feeling comfortable getting involved.
We've got a lot more work to do on this, Lori.
I just wanted to say thank you for helping the parents that are involved in the lawsuit tell their story, and it's so important, and it's been a relief to give those parents their voice, and I'm just so excited that finally something is happening, and we invite anyone that wants to come to a meeting, and we'll tell you when and where. And we wanted to let you know though, last night it was standing room only, so get there early.
Parents United, Parents Union, I know that's a term you use as well. We'll square that up. But parents are uniting indeed. We're going to be there. We're going to have you both back, I'm sure, very soon next week. Just so everyone knows, a temporary restraining order has been requested. There could be a hearing on that as soon as early next week. Whether the judge puts a high bar to grant a restraining order, we'll see. But either way, the suit will go on. These parents are committed. We need more of you to stand behind them. Go to rifreedom.org/Parents United. Fill out that form. Tell us your story if you have one. If we're going to change things, we need an awful lot of grassroots parental involvement. Not just the parents you're seeing right here. Not just the 14 plaintiff parents. Not just the 2 or 3 other dozens who are waiting to become plaintiffs. But all of you, all parents across Rhode Island. For In the Dugout on this breaking news special, thank you. Rich, thank you, Lori. We'll talk to you soon.